The approach would be our campaign platform from 2015. One of the things, for example, that was mentioned in that platform is dealing with the issue of background checks and the need to ensure that that is a system that actually serves the interests of public safety. And indeed, as controversial as measures related to firearms can be, and we've seen the kind of debate that's been provoked in the past around these issues, that particular point with respect to background checks and making sure that it is a system that works to protect public safety, that's an area where there is broad consensus. Our goal is to prioritize public safety and at the same time, as we bring our legislation forward, making sure that we are being practical and fair with respect to legitimate firearms owners.
Hi, Minister. Just one mic.
Yes, sorry.
It's Rebecca Lindell.
Sorry, you're right. Okay.
Rebecca Lindell from Global News. While we're talking about legislation, you'll have to forgive me for not having the platform in front of me, but you know, will there be, or will you look at measures on illegal firearms as well as people trying to obtain firearms?
The whole message around the platform is about illegal handguns and assault weapons. That is the language that is used in the platform document. That's the language that's expressed in the mandate letter given to me by the Prime Minister as I took on the responsibilities in public safety. So it's very much focused on the illegal use of weapons and on illegal weapons themselves.
And you mentioned that you guys are discussing how to spend this money, and many police forces in cities know how they'd spend their money and know what they would like to do with it and when. I just would like to know, do you have any sense of how this money will be divided by cities or jurisdictions, and what exactly will be done with it to drive that crime rate down?
The focus of the funding will be on where the problems exist. So obviously, the spending pattern will be the subject of very careful discussion with provincial governments and with municipalities, but we'll be targeting where the issues are the most acute. One area where there has been common agreement from the provinces and from law enforcement is with respect to the integrated, coordinated enforcement teams that law enforcement puts together community by community or region by region to make sure that they are drawing all of the necessary resources into the one place and leveraging each other, sharing information, getting the best data, cooperating with each other so that they have a seamless community or regional approach. And we heard several examples of that in the room today from Minister Farnworth, for example, in British Columbia, from the RCMP in British Columbia. They made reference to that. Mayor Tory made reference to it as have his police authorities. So supporting the comprehensive integrated enforcement teams, some of which exist, and perhaps there may need to be new ones that are put in place, but that effort is, I think, agreed across the board as important, effective, useful, and it needs to be properly funded going forward. There have been many interventions in the room about making vulnerable communities, especially of young people, less susceptible in advance to the insidious lure of gang activity. We had examples from Abbotsford, from Edmonton, from Saskatoon, from Toronto, and other places, where people were citing specific initiatives at the community level that were in part crime prevention, but were also in part building healthy communities and healthy lifestyles so that people are, from the beginning, less vulnerable and more to the lure of gangs and more resilient and able to withstand that pressure. That's another area where federal support, I think, can be helpful. There's another area of what happens when somebody's already stuck in that lifestyle, but wants to get out, and how can you support them in escaping from the gang culture? And we've seen examples straight up, for example, in Saskatoon as an illustration of that, which is programming after the fact, but helping people escape from the bad lifestyle in which they've fallen. There's also a very clear message that we need to have reinforcing policies on housing and homelessness. Jean-Yves Duclos has already launched a massive effort there with respect to the new national housing strategy that will be helpful. Job creation, access to education, adequate, particularly urban infrastructure. All of those things play a role in whether you've got a community that's prone to gang activity or more resilient to gang activity. And obviously we'll be trying to line up all of those things to make sure that they all reinforce each other.
Estelle Côté from Radio-Canada. I have two questions. Well, you can answer in English and then maybe an answer in French.
Okay.
Also. You know, the issues are very different in each part of the country. How are you going to make sure the money is going to address those specific issues which are not the same in Quebec and BC, for example?
That's an excellent point, and really one of the reasons why we need this national summit, and why this discussion needs to be ongoing. Not just one conversation today, but a conversation that we have the means and the tools to carry forward. Because it's not an identical problem everywhere in the country. There is a guns and gangs problem generally across Canada, but it varies from community to community, from big city to small town to a rural area. It is constantly changing, as police forces have said. This beast is always on the move and constantly different from one location to another, one set of circumstances to another. So we have to be flexible. We have to be nimble in the way we're able to respond to this. And we will need to, while we want national consistency and fairness, we will have to have regional flexibility to ensure that we are in fact providing the kind of support and activity in each local area across the country that is relevant to that area based upon the best local advice. So that flexibility has to be built into the programming and the distribution of the funds.
So maybe answer in French and then I'll have my follow-up question.
Comme le ministre vient de dire, certainement ça c'était l'objectif de ce sommet aujourd'hui, de la discussion qu'on a eue à l'intérieur. Tous les intervenants qui ont fait des présentations ont souligné le fait que, oui, c'est important d'avoir une approche nationale, mais aussi, il faut être très, très sensible à la réalité régionale, la réalité dans chaque province de notre pays. On avait démontré que pour l'argent qu'on va dépenser, et puis c'est exactement la raison pour laquelle on a eu ce sommet, qu'on entre en discussion avec tous les paliers gouvernementaux à travers le pays et certainement pour s'assurer qu'on va refléter la réalité sur la réalité locale pour s'assurer qu'on peut répondre, on peut prendre élaborer des programmes, élaborer des politiques qui vont être la réflexion locale qui arrive à travers le Canada. Parce que, comme le ministre a dit, oui, certainement, il y a une réalité dans les grandes villes, mais aussi il y a une réalité pour adresser cette question-là dans des régions.
So my follow-up question may be, how are you going to make sure the money actually goes down to the frontline workers? Because that's something we've heard. Some people are worried about that.
We heard that point from Mayor Tory and from others. And it's just I think a reminder to all of us to be vigilant and diligent in the way this programming is applied. $327 million over 5 years is a significant amount of money. $100 million a year ongoing thereafter is a significant amount of money. I don't want a penny of that to go in some unproductive direction that doesn't meet the objective. We'll be watching very carefully. And the key, I think, is to listen to the local communities on the ground about what they need and what will work best for them. The policy-making process is very often a top-down process, and to a certain extent, for accountability reasons, it needs to be that way. But we need to build into the structure here the ability to listen to local organizations, many of whom have spoken here today, saying that it's not a case of one national approach. It's not a case of one size fits all. We all have our exceptionalities and our nuances, and we need to tailor this to local requirements. And that's what we'll be endeavoring to do. And we'll be asking all of our partners, provinces, municipalities, the non-governmental organizations to embrace that approach so we can have maximum effect on the ground.
We have time for one last question.
Oops, sorry.
Todd Lamran, the Aboriginal People's Television Network. You mentioned Straight Up this morning in their presentation, but what can you do to target the increasing recruitment of young Indigenous people on First Nations and not in an urban environment?
I think it involves presence and outreach and deliberate effort. And I think of many of the First Nations leaders, local chiefs that I know in Saskatchewan and around the country, who would be very anxious to cooperate and collaborate in that effort. What they will insist upon, though, and I think rightly so, is that we come to that discussion with them with an open mind and the realization and the recognition that they will know their circumstances, and particularly their young people on First Nations will know their circumstances more and better than anyone else. So when we consult with First Nations, it needs to be in an open, inclusive, receptive frame of mind, and not dictating policy from the top down. This will rely, if it's going to be successful, on First Nations young people themselves telling us what is the right shape of the programming and relying on them to lead.
Now, the Public Safety Committee has been looking at the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in prisons. And we had another report from the McDonald-Laurier Institute that shamed Alberta into putting their statistics out there, and they're pretty bad. So what will that committee do to create policy that will lessen, to lower those rates? As you probably know, nearly 40% of all the women who are in prison, 40% are Indigenous, for example.
The overrepresentation rate of Indigenous people with the criminal justice system, both the system itself and then the correctional system thereafter, is simply unacceptable. And in his mandate letter to me, the Prime Minister said to me, and also said to Jody Wilson-Raybould, that has to change. And we are in the process of changing both the laws and the procedures and the programming that will help us turn a corner. But we're just at the very beginning of that process. we've got a lot of work left to do. One dimension of this will be identifying the susceptibility of Indigenous young people to the lure of gangs, and what can be done in collaboration with First Nations and First Nations youth in particular to present alternatives which will be more attractive and more successful in terms of their futures, and an approach that is respectful of their cultural heritage and aspirations. And I've had a number of younger Aboriginal leaders. I can think of young Chief Cadmus Delorme from Saskatchewan, who has very valuable advice to offer on this topic about how we can invest appropriately to increase the prospects of success for Indigenous youth who may be at risk of being drawn into a lifestyle that would be very dangerous and indeed contrary to all of their cultural aspirations. We have to listen very carefully to people like Cadmus Delorme.
Thanks very much, Minister. Thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate your time and your interest. The Minister has to get back into the
Yeah.
session, so thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.